Howdy y'all, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we will look to answer one simple question. Did Indigenous Americans build the forts which Europeans founded in the 17th and 18th centuries? To clarify, I use the term indigenous meaning a previous society or culture which thrived in the Americas before the currently accepted history says that the first settlers from Europe arrived. For this question, we will take a step through time, pondering the authenticity of centuries-old reports, while examining the figurative holes in the current narrative. Let us begin in the year 1749. At this time, we have the first documentation of a massive man-made trail, which crossed the Allegheny Mountains and connected the watersheds of the Potomac and the Monongahela rivers, or connecting what is modern-day Cumberland, Maryland, to Brownsville, Pennsylvania. However, some modern scholars contest that this original path was once much longer. This trail, which helped give safe passage to the first European travelers in America seeking to head west, was known as Nemacolin's Trail, or more infrequently, Nemacolin's Path. If this doesn't indicate what was happening at that time, I'm not sure what will, but in 1749 through 1750, the ancient trail, which according to Indigenous Americans had been in use for hundreds of years previously, was revealed to frontiersman Thomas Cresap by Delaware chieftain Nemacolin. With the help of Nemacolin and the Delaware Indigenous people, we're told the trail through the Allegheny Mountains was mapped and modernized for use by European settlers, leading to the now fully cleared path gaining the name of Nemacolin's Trail. Yet, by 1755, just 5 years after the path was first shown to Europeans, the oath of peace was broken, and General Braddock of the British forces not only marched along Nemacolin's Trail, but Braddock and the British actually claimed the road to be their own. They went as far as saying they reinforced the majority of the path of the road, thus giving the road the title Braddock's Road, which is considered by modern historians to be the first, quote, improved road to cross the Appalachian Mountains. That being said, the entire march of General Braddock was partially led by one of Braddock's highest-ranking colonels, George Washington, and the British's target was the star fort known as Fort Duquesne, which later became the site of the city of Pittsburgh. The British were defeated in this battle, but the traversing and clearing of Nemacolin's path for the military Braddock's Road led to future advancements by the British and later Americans into lands that were occupied by the indigenous people. However, I'd like to focus back on Nemacolin's Road and the westernmost terminus of this ancient path, which was known as the Old Redstone Fort, or Fort Burd. We're told a massive, yet wooden fort was built here by Thomas Burd, a leading frontiersman and member of the Pennsylvania militia. It was completed in 1759, constructed atop the towering Native American mound which overlooked the end of the trail. This mound, however, is also shrouded in mystery, as before occupation by the British, the French are noted as marking the mound on maps as Hangard, showing the location as a significant point with significant architecture. According to Burd himself, the mound was already complete with giant red sandstone blocks which were used in the foundation of the new fort. After being built out or founded by the Pennsylvania militia, Redstone Fort became a major pilgrimage site for Quakers. Before diving into this history too much more, I'd like to make reference to the Susquehannock Native Americans, a now considered extinct people who once were credited with constructing many of the earliest towns and settlements across Maryland. Furthermore, when their home fort, which stretched across much of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, was destroyed, the Susquehannock were forced to live along the Potomac River, where they constructed similar forts to the massive ones that they left in Lancaster. Their new home along the Potomac River would be short-lived, however, and eventually the Susquehannock were granted properties back in Lancaster. Their abandoned lands along the Potomac River later became the site for Washington, D.C. Nemacolin's Trail would have had one terminus roughly around this same location. The Redstone Fort became quintessential in the establishment of American forces in the region, and following the battle for independence, we're told an even larger structure was founded at the site of the Redstone Fort. This became known as Nemacolin Castle, a massive, red, old world style castle said to be built quite literally out of the foundations of the Redstone Fort, itself built out of the foundations of the earlier defensive structure built atop the mound. So essentially, by the year 1789, a massive castle, which served as housing, a trading post, a tavern, and a library, was formed from the ruins of earlier structures, with the same massive red blocks being reused. Furthermore, this castle, which still stands today, served as the terminus for Nemacolin's Trail, a trail which seemingly interconnected ancient and fortified mounds built by the Mound Builders. The trail was first made permanent, according to the narrative, by Braddock and George Washington. The latter would go on to rewrite history, becoming the first president of the United States. The first national road mimicked parts of the trail. The entire town, which was formed around Redstone Fort and the Redstone Castle, was said to have been built almost entirely using the same red sandstone bricks. The first meeting of the Whiskey Rebellion, or a plot to overthrow Washington due to his heavy taxes, was planned within the old Redstone Fort. The last mention of the fort in use would come from 1803 in a letter to Thomas Jefferson. However, Nemacolin's Castle, the out-of-place indigenous named castle built out of the ruins of indigenous mound builder structures, still stands today. Furthermore, seemingly indicating a proper occupation and the castle predating European settlers, when Braddock's road was being constructed along Nemacolin's Trail, Braddock and Washington purposefully rerouted the trail as to not directly pass the Redstone Mound. It seems there was already something there which could not be conquered. I'm of the opinion that this was a much larger indigenous community which not only had a well-marked trail, but also had significantly larger structures made of red sandstone and brick, which stood atop the even more ancient mounds. I believe the star forts founded around America at this time seem to go hand in hand with the indigenous cultures, the trails which had evolved through indigenous Americans for thousands of years, and suddenly, upon European arrival, we then have the creation of star forts being built just in a dozen years. But usually there were minimal labor forces involved, and usually these star forts were minimally occupied. Yet, if we consider these structures, at least their foundations, to be predating European settlement, it can be attested to by multiple accounts that we can read from the 17th and 18th centuries, including those of John Smith. Then we may begin to heal the wound that has been bestowed upon this historical narrative. The old Red Fort seemingly disappears off the map and out of history books by the early 1800s, being replaced by the robust story of a European settler building a massive red castle, named after the indigenous man who made it all possible. The trail, which culminates in this epic fortification, also has ties to the lost Susquehannock and other tribes which did not survive. They occupied and built out lands which would become Washington, D.C., and these lands were first crossed by Europeans who included Washington on a trail that leads us from Earth Mound to Earth Mound. Yet today, most of the history is seldom discussed, and for the majority of the world, it has been forgotten.